Hey, book lovers. My name is Em, and I want to talk about books. And cats. Welcome to Season 3, book lovers. Can you believe it? I am super excited for another season of sharing books and cat stories with you. Today I've got 2 books for you, and you will see why. And speaking of bringing you books, I have a new collection of short stories out right now. It is called 3:33 a.m., and it features 6 horror stories about monsters, both internal and external. You can check it out on Amazon, or you can go to frapmedia.com. And if you're more of an audiobook person, then hold on just a little longer. The audiobook is coming soon, probably next month. Okay, so now let's get into this week's books. I've got 2, and they're both kind of intense, but in different ways. I decided this year that I need to read more of a variety of genres because thrillers made up probably 90% of the books that I read last year. And honestly, I need something a little lighter, which is kind of funny when you hear about this week's books because I did not change a thing this week. Book 1 is incredibly unsettling, so I decided I would cover a second book kind of as a palate cleanser. And then I ended up choosing an upsetting, though at least fictional, thriller. I'm a creature of habit, if nothing else. Anyway, regardless of what goals I set for myself and whether or not I achieved them, both of these books were extremely intriguing, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about If You Tell, a true story of murder, family secrets, and the unbreakable bond of sisterhood by Greg Olson. So this is the story of Shelley Notek and her completely unbelievable, horrendous acts of violence and cruelty, both against her own family and others, to the point of death. Like, multiple deaths. This book was a complete bummer. I am not shaken by much, but this story is true and it is just so unbelievably terrible. It's just beyond words, which is hard for a podcast. So this book was suggested to me on Kindle, and I thought it sounded interesting. I enjoy true crime, and of course, I'm always interested in people, especially people with messed up mothers. But this woman is pure insanity. Like, it's just unreal. Before reading the book, I actually heard the story covered on My Favorite Murder. And I was like, oh, cool, I'm definitely going to read this book. Let's just say that My Favorite Murder left out a lot of the details. It was way too gruesome, even for their podcast, I guess. It's also told from the perspective of the daughters, and I think that makes it just so much more terrible because that was their life. I'm normally a very fast reader, but this book took me forever. I had to keep stopping and putting it down because it was just too much. I was getting so frustrated by the things that this woman was getting away with just over and over again, and the escalation was wild. It was too much. I know I just keep saying that it's wild and too much, but I honestly don't know how else to describe it. This book really hit a nerve. Honestly, I think I got about 3/4 of the way through it before I had to kind of start skimming over some of the abuse parts. By the time she was starting in on the 3rd family friend, it was so repetitive that honestly, I don't think I missed anything by skimming. So, spoilers ahead for the next couple of minutes. I'm not going to go into the gruesome details because, as I keep saying, it's too much. But I am going to discuss certain moments in the book. So if you want to read this book, jump ahead a bit. So, like I said, the book is told from the perspective of the daughters. Nikki is the oldest, and she is by far abused the worst. The one thing that really stuck out, and I don't know if it's because it was repeated in the book many times or what, but Shelley used a punishment called wallowing, where Nikki had to strip naked and roll around in the mud while Shelley or Shelley's husband Dave sprayed her with a hose. It was usually at night, but it could be any time of day. I don't know. Maybe it sticks out because it was the first really big escalation in her abuse, although it's not even close to the worst thing that she does. But for some reason, this part just haunted me. It's so dehumanizing and humiliating. And she was doing this to her daughter. I can't even conceive of a mother doing these things to her children. So Nikki was finally able to escape after years and years and years of horrible torture. She ran away. It wasn't easy. Any runaway attempts were usually foiled by Shelley because she was like a bloodhound, and she could always sniff them out, and she would bring them back. And she would make everybody search just for hours and hours until they found them and brought them back. And then, of course, there would be extra punishments. But Nikki did finally get out. She got away, and she managed to make a real life for herself. She had a husband and children and just a nice, normal life, finally. The next child is Sammy. She's the golden child. She got punished, but never really as harshly as Nikki. She was definitely favored by their mother. And she also knew how to keep quiet and do what she was told most of the time. She also occasionally would snitch on her sister to save her own skin, which honestly is not great, but it's also totally understandable if you're just in survival mode, She manages to have a fairly normal life outside of the house. She has friends at school. She manages to graduate and go to college. But there are a lot of complications, and there's a ton of abuse behind the scenes. Shelley made all of her daughters' lives a living hell. So Sammy didn't run away. She waited to move to college, and then from there she found a life of her own. She is the one who struggled the most with turning in her mother. She really delayed the investigation for quite some time once Nikki had finally gone to the police because she refused to talk to the sheriffs. Sammy only comes around once she discovers that their quite a bit younger sister, Tori, is also being abused the same that they were. She thought it was better, and she thought that Tori was not getting treated so badly somehow. She's quite a bit younger than Sammy, so Sammy's kind of already out of the house before Tori's abuse really gets bad. Because at that point, Shelley has other targets beyond her own children. People that really needed help and accepted her kind offers of warm meals and a roof overhead in exchange for just a little help around her property. These arrangements with her friends escalate incredibly quickly, and she abuses them even worse than the girls, so much worse than the girls. And she continues to abuse them until they die. And then her and her husband send the girls away for a weekend and burn the body. 3 different times. This woman is an absolute monster. This book is just truly gruesome in some places. It is really, really disturbing. And like I said, I am not shaken by much, but this was intense. Shelley does eventually get caught, but there isn't a ton of physical evidence. Just the girls' testimonies. They did a really good job of getting rid of every little speck of the people that they killed. She gets 18 years, which honestly is not much for such a vile woman who killed 3 people. She actually got out in November of 2022, so she is back out in the world. Hopefully changed, but I doubt it. There's definitely some issues there. Hopefully she's medicated now. So like I said a million times, this book is wild. It was incredibly detailed and incredibly upsetting. I guess I would say that I recommend this book, but only with a huge pinch of caution. If things like this bother you, I wouldn't read this one. But if you like true crime and you want to test how unshakable you are, go for it. But be prepared because it is rough. So before I get into book 2, and to lighten the mood a little bit, I've got a cat update for you all. Smokey Christmas is in the house. He has become a permanent member of the family. Smokey came inside on Christmas Day. It was super cold, and he was just standing at the door waiting. And it wasn't, we've been feeding him a little bit, and it wasn't like waiting for food. It was different, and you could tell that he wanted to come inside. And honestly, the transition has been pretty smooth. He's a really nice little cat. He still kind of hisses, but he's really just scared. Like, he doesn't try to scratch anyone. He just runs away, but he's really sweet too. He's a little scared of the animals still. And they, of course, keep trying to be friends and play because they don't understand why he's so, touchy. But he loves his people already. Like, he's so affectionate and so sweet. So yeah, that's going very, very well. And he is so cute. He looks so much like Edward, our oldest kitty, who is also a Christmas kitty. He appeared right around Christmas 6 years ago. We're wondering if maybe they're from the same barn. Maybe they're relatives of some kind. I love black fluffy cats, and I am super excited to have 2. But yeah, he's definitely getting comfortable. He's moving around the house really openly now. And he is a big fan of head scratches and catnip treats. Oh my goodness, the catnip treats. I bought those for Christmas for the cats, and I think I've bought like 2 more packages since then because they love them. Everybody does. It's so cute. And it definitely helped me win Smokey over. Yeah, he's going to settle in just fine. Our next challenge is taking him to the vet. His tail is a little rough looking, and we want to get him checked out. He seems pretty healthy, considering. And it's kind of amazing what consistent meals and a warm, safe place to sleep can do. He already looks like so much better. And he needs to get fixed because we did ascertain that he is definitely a he. So we need to take care of that now too. Fun stuff. He's going to love that. Anyway, it is now time for a quick break, book lovers. When I come back, I've got another book to discuss, as well as a new chapter of my weekly writing project, Ocean Eyes. Be right back. Welcome back, book lovers. Time for book 2. And though fictional, this one deals with some very difficult and very real topics, such as postpartum depression, sleepwalking, and motherhood. This was not the light, fun palate cleanser that I had planned on, but it was a really good book that hooked me immediately, so it's a win. So today I'm going to talk about All the Dangerous Things by Stacy Willingham. If you listened last season, end of last season, you may remember that I managed to forget that I read another book by Stacy Willingham, one that was good enough to make it to the top reads of the year shelf, but then I also chose as my free book of the year book in December because I had completely forgotten that I read it. And this baffled me. Like, I don't have a great memory. I've had issues that have caused some memory loss. But usually if a book is good enough to make it to the shelf of best reads of the year, I'm going to remember it. So this was really bothering me, and I figured out, finally, how I could forget about a book that I truly enjoyed. It's called The Flicker in the Dark, if you're interested. It was the first book that I covered in 2022. So obviously, I'm going to have forgotten about it by November because my memory is Swiss cheese. So, mystery solved. When I got that second copy of A Flicker in the Dark, I also ordered another book by her, All the Dangerous Things, which is the one I want to talk about today, because I figured, why not start the year with another Stacy Willingham book? Anyway, this was a good book. This woman really knows how to craft a surprising and engaging thriller. I was so engrossed in this main character's life that I didn't even care if she ended up being the villain. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let's start with the main character. Her name is Isabel Drake. She is a bereft mother whose child was taken from his crib in the middle of the night. She's also an insomniac who hasn't slept in a year since her son Mason disappeared. Deep down, she is terrified that she has done something to hurt her son, because before she was an insomniac, she was a very deep sleeper and a sleepwalker. She's not entirely certain, but she also thinks that she may have been the reason for her younger sister's accident back when they were kids, the one that ended in her sister drowning in the marsh behind the house. Even with these thoughts constantly in the back of her mind, Isabel searches every day for what happened to her son. She refuses to ever give up searching. Finally, she meets a true crime podcaster who might be able to help her get her story out there and maybe help her discover the truth. This was just a really excellent book. I was hooked immediately, and I was swept up in Isabel's somewhat unhinged approach to finding the truth. And then the twist hits hard and fast, and it kind of leaves your head spinning. And it has a really good, satisfying ending. I definitely would recommend All the Dangerous Things by Stacy Willingham. And this one will also be going on the shelf of my favorite reads of the year, because this one was surprising and good. And while it kind of follows the standard thriller thing, there are surprises. There were things that I didn't expect, and considering how many of these I read, that's pretty impressive. All the Dangerous Things by Stacy Willingham. Check it out. So now it's time for the quote of the week. And this week's quote is, I guess, a bit sarcastic given the beginning of this episode, but I decided to look up quotes about family. And this may have been a mistake. I had a far, far better life than the no-tech girls, but families are always complicated. I found this quote from Khalil Gibran, and I found it kind of interesting. He has a lot of great quotes, but I have a not-so-good memory associated with one of them. It's actually from his poem On Children. It began, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you." So I sang this as part of a performance during a summer arts camp when I was a teenager. And I loved it. The song was really beautiful. The words are beautiful. And I was young, and I wasn't entirely thinking about the meaning behind the words. I mean, I kind of was. I only revisited it later because that song has never left me. It was solidified in my memory by the reaction that followed that performance. The reaction was memorable for not the best reasons, but I kind of understand the response now. Sort of, anyway. Well, this is the longest quote of the week ever, and I'm not even talking about the quote that I wanted to share. Today's quote is kind of along the same lines, and it also really speaks to how I have tried to raise my own kiddos. The difference between the two experiences is quite stark. I swear that healing is just constantly being shocked by your own memories. Anyway, here's the quote. "You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth." And that's the truth. I think the world would be greatly benefited by people understanding that children, young adults, are separate human beings. Even if they're not fully grown, they are their own being, and they are not an object to be owned. But that's just my 2 cents. Anyway, finally, it is time for my weekly writing project. I am currently working on book 2 of my Verdant Valley series, currently called Ocean Eyes, although I just realized that that is also the name of a song by Billie Eilish, so I'm not sure. I might change the title. I might keep it. I don't know. Anyway, I am sharing this story with you a chapter a week with no revisions, just straight from my brain to you. And I'm going to start Season 3 off with Chapter 13 of Ocean Eyes. Enjoy. Morena moved silently through the trees. She moved slowly, being careful not to snap any twigs or rustle leaves. The forest was eerily quiet. A hint of movement to her left made her freeze. After a moment of stillness, she slowly bent her knees and sunk into the tangle of brush next to her. There was a scuffle amongst the leaves and a familiar snuffling. A high-pitched whine pierced through the silence. Morena stood and waited. The boar was unusually large, the size of a small bear and the color of rust. Thick black hairs like quills speckled its mud-caked hide, and the intimidating creature stood still and raised its snout into the air. It stomped its hooves and unleashed a deafening squeal. A flash of copper swooped overhead. The high-pitched whine sliced through the boar's thunderous cacophony. Morena remained still and waited. A few more flashes and another pounding of hooves, and the boar fell silent. A broad-shouldered figure stood beside the beast, with a hand resting on its thick neck. Their long, coppery hair was braided to one side and flowed free on the other. A long scar ran down either cheek, and one bright green, mischievous eye peered at her. Their skin puckered around the scars as they smiled at Morena. "Hello, Death Witch," they began, their smile fading quickly. "What brings you to my forest?" Morena smirked and flexed her silvery wings. The look of astonishment in their one visible eye made her laugh. "I wasn't aware you owned these woods, Serd." The keeper of the trees was still staring at her with their mouth agape. Serd pushed back their long, coppery locks and revealed both wide, disbelieving eyes. They dropped suddenly to one knee and bowed. "Oh, come on," Morena said. "How long have we known each other? Get up. I don't have time for this." Serd stood and clasped their hands in front of them. Their thin copper wings trembled a little. "I had heard the stories, but I didn't know what to believe. Forgive me. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just shocked." "I'm the same as always," she said impatiently. "I'm looking for Yada. Have you seen her lately? Maybe in the deep woods?" Serd looked around, reassured that they were alone. They laid a hand on their giant beast and leaned against the boar with a heavy sigh. "Almost," they said finally. "Pier saw her, didn't you?" Serd patted the animal as she grunted her response. "She was being held in the cave, but she was gone before I got there." Morena felt her heart drop. "Which cave?" "You know which cave." Serd held her gaze for a long moment, then dropped their gaze to the forest floor. They scooped up a handful of pine needles and began to nervously pick them apart. "That's not possible," Morena said finally. "Rhea and I closed it centuries ago, when we first arrived here. It's not possible." Serd looked uncomfortable. "Yada has been putting energy into the stone. I don't know why, but I don't think she knew what she was doing." Serd scuffed the ground with a toe and dropped their handful of shredded pine needles. "I caught her last week and told her to stop. I think I frightened her. I did not react well when I realized what was happening." Serd paused and finally brought their eyes to meet Morena's. "I was too late. I don't know how I missed it. Many things are roaming the deep woods right now, Morena, and I have no idea how they came to be here. I have failed my post. The forest will be overrun soon enough, and I can do nothing about it." Morena pressed her lips together and said nothing. Her irritation was boiling her blood, but she gave Serd a patient smile. "We can't give up hope, my friend. What happens after the forest falls? The villagers would be completely destroyed, and a wave of evil will flow over all the lands." Serd nodded grimly. "I know you're right. I just don't know if I have it in me, Mar. They're creatures of essence. They're invisible, Mar, with fangs. How do we fight something like that?" Morena's heart sank even further. More confirmation of her worst fears. But who could wield such a power, and why? Who would choose to unleash monsters on the world? There would be nothing left. She had no answer for Serd. They had been banished once before, long, long before anything stood on these lands. She tried to remember the earliest pages of the book, filled with the faded, neat handwriting. Some lines were smudged beyond comprehension. Marina had meant to go through the section and piece together the remaining information. She wanted to kick herself for never getting around to it. Serd followed her in silence to the cave, and Marina immediately saw the remnants of the shield magic that had trapped her protégé. She knelt and ran her fingertips through the glittery dust. She stood and moved swiftly into the cave. She pressed her hands against the stone, and it grew hot under her touch. A terrible screeching sound surrounded her and shook the walls of the cave. Suddenly there was a loud pop and a blinding flash of light. Electricity shot through Marina and sent her flying. She slammed into Serd, who was watching from just outside the cave entrance, and they both toppled into the trees beyond. The impact made the trees shudder, and a large branch cracked and fell to the ground only inches from where they lay. Piers scrambled through the bushes, and Marina and Serd flew quickly behind. They crashed out of the forest and hurried to Yada's cottage. Marina froze when she reached it. The door, which she had carefully triple-locked when she left, was splintered and smashed open. She ran to the door, but she knew what she would find behind the broken boards. Nothing. Rhea was gone. So that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, book lovers. I am super excited for season 3. I've got some fun new things coming up. If you need a new read and you like horror stories, please check out my new collection, 3:33 a.m. It is available currently in paperback and ebook on Amazon.com or frapmedia.com, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate the support. Like I said, the audiobook is coming soon, probably next month, and I will let you know as soon as it is available. I'm really happy with this one, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Anyway, I hope you have a beautiful week full of reading and snuggles with your favorite pet, because we are not exclusive to just cats, despite the name. Take care of yourselves, book lovers, and thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep reading.
A Frap Media production.